Hello, hello. It's me again, Dan Matheny. How the heck are you? Anyway, yesterday I talked about DWM. I could have elaborated better on patches and what I mean, and I even installed a patch today that was completely good, but just didn't work. But that's because I didn't have the status bar installed, and I just wanted different colors, the three different sections. But anyway, I'm just going to share a little bit of my story about how I got into technology. Anyway, I grew up back in the 80s. There was only 4 channels on TV, and all I had was a pinball machine and a Tandy 1000 computer, and 4 channels on a television. That's all I had growing up. Sometime around the late 80s is when I was introduced to video games, and this was inspiring because it was a Nintendo, it was a big deal then. Earl's Video Store was awesome before Blockbuster. Anyway, I grew up in a simpler time, and then the 90s came. Doom came out. Doom was freaking awesome. That was a game changer. And people talk about certain games, emulating everything. Guess what? Doom is that game. Doom is that first-person game that influenced everything that you see today out of gaming, out of Fortnite, out of first-person shooters. Sure, there's different gaming engines. The Unreal Tournament engine is what Fortnite uses, basically, or that's what it seems like to me. I could be wrong, and hey, I'm happy with being wrong. But anyway, back in 2001 was when I discovered Linux. But let me backtrack a little bit. Back in 1998, I was introduced to fixing my dad's computers. I mean, in 91 was when I was first introduced to Macs. But anyway, I started to tinker around with Macs. I would help my dad out by fixing some stuff sometimes on the computers. The old 50-pin SCSI hard drives. They were interesting, to say the least. SCSI, you don't hear about SCSI much anymore. But anyway, I discovered Windows maybe around 2000, around that time, as I started to get more into learning about certain things, learning the ropes, if you will, on hardware and software and how that works more, even though I knew about it on Macs. But I really didn't comprehend what I was doing it. But anyway, I discovered that I did use Windows for a couple years, like from 2000 to 2004, especially certain games I like to play. I mean, even around the late 90s, I'd say more like 98, 99, because of certain games I played. Sorry, got the burps. Feeling a little better today, but I still feel uncomfortable a lot because I have 2 hernias around my stomach. But anyway, I use everything. I'm learning. And and this is when I run into Linux for the first time. And it was different then. You didn't always have the internet available. I mean, you did, but you didn't. It's like you had the phone connection, but that's only so good. You have to buy the disk. You have to buy the Linux disk or the Linux book or whatever. I mean, Mandrake came with the book, and I read the book. And that was like my first experience with Linux Mandrake. And I got everything to work. And, when you're installing software, though, it's a different thing. It was different then. That's why DWM is awesome because, yeah, they use, sudo make install. You write to the code. It's really cool. But it's different. I mean, but what I'm talking about is different because when you're configuring software, different packages, you try to install one package, but guess what? It leaves you with 3 or 4 dependencies that it's looking for. It's kind of similar, but different. Because this is more complicated, guys. You get those packages, you download them, and granted, this is back in 2001, 2002. You download them, right? And then you install them, but then this creates a pyramid effect with different packages, different dependencies. You got to install sometimes you got to install 20 or 30 packages just for one piece of software to work. Granted, this is back 2002, 2001. Okay, but this is the norm for a lot of people. A lot of people just would install the disk, whatever version of Linux it was, and it was just substandard for them. They didn't mess around with anything else. Everything worked. Oh, okay, cool. Everything works. It's just how it was then. But anyway, I was learning for a while. I was playing Doom, all that. Doom was my inspiration to learn more about software. It still kind of is because I learned I got more into partying back at that time, back in 2004. 2004, you know, I was a mess, and I didn't use Linux. Long story short, didn't use Linux from 2004 to 2010. 2010, I get back into it. I installed one of the Ubuntu's, right? It was a Kubuntu first. Everything didn't work right away, so I waited 6 months later. The very first version of Ubuntu I used all the time was Ubuntu 10.10. Now, before that, I used Windows 10 for a little bit, but I got my Dell Inspiron 1545 laptop, which was awesome. Because I hadn't had a computer for 6 years or whatever. But anyway, I get back into Linux around that time, and I use it. I'm learning, but I'm not comprehending what the shell is yet. Even though people are talking about it and stuff, I just wasn't comprehending it yet. It just wasn't registering. Even though I could compile software and all that, which is funny because some of that did come back, but not all of it did. So I was just comfortable in a GUI for a while. Even though I grew up around terminal, like with the Tandy 1000 with the 386, if you will, where even though it was basic, but that's what I grew up with, and that's what I was used to. But I kind of drifted away from that when I used the desktop. Um, but anyway, I was adapting better to the GUI for whatever reason when I got back into it, which is funny, but that's just what happened. But I did eventually command savvy again, but I still wasn't processing what everything was, or I still didn't understand what everything was yet. Um, but around, I get savvy, around this time, it was Ubuntu first, then Arch, and then I got into Debian testing finally, or stable Debian testing. But I was kind of back and forth then between Arch and Debian testing, which is interesting because I did like both of them, but both of them were awesome, I think, really. So is FreeBSD, and I got FreeBSD set up, but I've forgotten all that. But I know that the OpenRC, similar to OpenRC, because I remember, setting up FreeBSD. It's an awesome system, and I do miss the simpler time, and I do miss it before there was System D. But it depends on the operating system you use. It's not just the init system; it's also your shell, your kernel. It's more than one component running your operating system. But anyway, I need to just. I'm trying to make this as short as I can because I did another video and I went over 30 minutes, and YouTube won't let me go live either, so because I don't have that many subscribers. But I appreciate the subscribers I do have, and I'm not worried about getting popular. I'm just having a conversation. So I'm just drinking coffee, doing some chores since I feel a little bit better. I feel uncomfortable. But anyway, 2015 was when I got stagnant again, and I was kind of just stagnant with what I knew for about 5 years. But then back, because I had saved my Doom wads that I had that I bought. I bought the software years ago and I saved the Doom wads. But anyway, around 2020, March 2020 last year, I got back into playing Doom again. But really, what got me into tinkering again was there's this software called Xandronum, which plays Doom mods or whatever, but it wasn't working correctly. It was working incorrectly, and I wanted to figure out why, but I couldn't do the workaround in Ubuntu, or what I was using at the time. It was Lubuntu. Couldn't do the workaround because it just wasn't flexible like Debian or like Arch. Because like I said, I was stagnant. Yeah, I was using Lubuntu for like 5 years, but it could happen. But anyway, I get to figuring out the workaround, and I do that, for a little bit, but it wasn't like a permanent solution. But but that's why I decided to just real hop and just be happy with GZ Doom or whatever. But anyway, that's what got me into window managers and desktops again and Linux. That's what got me back into the saddle. But I started understanding the whole system better, the init system, the shell, the file manager, the kernel, how things are set up. So I started understanding that better. And sometimes I don't elaborate very well on things, like on DWM. I could have elaborated better by showing what I meant by the patch not completely installing. But I did install a patch. I think it's already said that, where it's looking for the status bar, which I don't have installed, so it doesn't work. But I'm not worried about that. I was worried about colors. I just wanted to do something different. But I added some patches to D menu, and I was going to add a patch to ST, but I just really wanted to figure out how to zoom in and out of ST terminal. And but anyway, that's the good news, and I'm happy that I'm back into it. But technology is totally different. People are totally different now, and it's a changing thing, especially with what people were going through 10 years ago with System D. It's kind of that way right now with Wayland, but I don't think things are going to change very soon. That's still like a progressive thing with Wayland, but here's something that's kind of funny. That's kind of deja vu-ish to me in a sense. It's different circumstances, but kind of similar. You have Python, which 10 years ago, okay, people were kind of laughing, Python's not going to be much of anything. Well, you know what? There's a lot of jobs right now where people are, want you to know Python. There's people are talking about Python like it's a major game player. And that could happen with Rust. And a lot of people are talking about Rust, but still. People were talking about Python then, but people would brush it off like, it's nothing, right? But now people are doing that with Rust. To me, from what I see. And it's kind of like the game Doom. I don't know who said this, because I'll watch videos. I have my downtime where I'm watching all these different Linux users and different people that know about technology. Someone said something about Halo. Well, Doom is that game, okay? Doom is that game that influenced all the other games. And it inspired, Halo inspired all the other games, whether it's the same engine or not. It's the game that inspired all that. It's the granddaddy of them all, just like Debian's the granddaddy operating system. Doom is the granddaddy of them all, first-person game-wise. Even though it's not the specific first-person shooter game, it's the first-person game that made it popular. It's kind of like the thing with Black Sabbath. Did they really invent heavy metal? That's something that people always question. But anyway, same circumstance. They're on the same circumstances. History kind of repeats itself a little bit. From what I've seen. But there's also major change that happens. But it's, for me, what I've learned is take it easy and learn one thing at a time, and I've been able to really pick up and comprehend things better. That's just for me, I'd rather just install one patch at a time, make sure it's completely installed. And I did the same thing with Xmonad. When I was installing that, I didn't use someone else's config, because I've tried that, and for me that didn't work out too well. I had to use the basic config and then from scratch put together a config. There's just one game that doesn't work the way I want it to, and that's GZ Doom. Even though I can get the game to work on the screen, it still shows the border, which I don't like. So, but I think Xmonad's great. I think all the window managers and desktop environments are great. They're all great. All right? But anyway, that's going to conclude my 15 minutes of fame. Almost, anyway. So should I wait for 15 minutes? Just under 15 minutes of fame. See ya.